Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever it is for you. Welcome back to another Division 2 video, and I got another banger of a build for you. This is the updated and better version of the crit armor generation build. We can hit even higher armor generation stats right now with TU20, with the update, and a lot of other things are buffed as well, just like the damage talent that we are using. There are a few very nice changes with TU20 and the builds where we can make this armor generation god. Getting up to that 6.5% armor generation, running around with 1.5 million armor and still beaming through enemies. As you can see in the background, we're shredding through a CP4. I thought I'd give you a little bit more different gameplay than always going for a mission, always going for Lincoln or whatever. So this is such a great build. I know a lot of y'all have been asking me underneath my previous build videos to go into a little bit more survivability, and this is the build for you. If you want a perfect combination between survivability and damage output, this is the build for you. Beaming through enemies while keeping yourself alive. If they beam you down, you only have to go into cover or out of combat for just a little bit to get that full armor regeneration up to par, giving you all your armor back and shredding through enemies again. It is a lot of fun to play around with, and like I said, with the TU20 update, this build even became better. So let's jump into my 6.5% armor generation crit god. And there we are, starting with our specialization. We're using the gunner specialization mainly for our 10% armor on kill and that third reload faster. Yes, we're running around with an armor generation build, so that 10% armor on kill isn't that necessary, but I just love to run around with that minigun, and I don't really use a shield or anything, so I'm just sticking with this specialization. If you like to play with a shield, what will give you some extra damage output, then go for that firewall specialization, because that has that striker shield that give you some extra survivability, and then of course some extra damage output as well. Then let's jump over to my weapons, starting with my main weapon, and that's the Saint. Almost 92.4k total damage, an RPM of 850, a mag of 17. This gun is on expertise level 24, and of course damage to target out of cover on there. My secondary weapon is the classic M1A, 390.3k total damage, an RPM of 180, a mag of 15. Again, we went for damage to target out of cover, of course, and this gun is at expertise level 20. I went for boomerang as a talent on there. Critical hits have 50% chance to return the bullet into the magazine. If a bullet is returned to the magazine, the next shot has a 40% increased damage. And I chose to go for 2 critical hit chance mods and a 5 extra rounds on this weapon. For your pistol, doesn't really matter what you use. I would recommend you using a pistol that you do not have proficient yet. This will rank up for your extra XP, and it will of course save you with donating materials and or duplicates. Then let's jump over to the overview of the build, and this is the build I was just rocking with. Starting with my Golan, we have 2 pieces of Golan. Why? Because that is a 1.5% armor generation active, and this is the first boost of this build. With TU20, this went from 1% armor generation to 1.5% armor generation. I chose to go for armor, critical hit damage, armor generation as the attribute, and then a 6% critical hit chance mod on there. Then for my second piece, I went for my gloves. Again, armor, armor generation, and crit chance, and this second piece will activate that 1.5% armor generation. Then jumping over to my knee pads, and these are the Murakami knee pads, also giving you that extra 1% armor generation, because these are the named Emperor's Guards, and that 1% armor generation will always be on your attributes. I found it with critical hit damage already on there, so I could roll that skill core away for weapon damage. Then jumping over to my only damage piece on the build, and that's Gruppo. Y Grupo 15% critical hit damage, 15% weapon damage, 6% crit chance, and 12% crit damage as the attributes on there. Then jumping over to my chest piece, and that will be Bellstone, activating another armor generation, so giving us now a total of 3.5% armor generation. Again, I chose to go for armor, critical hit chance, and armor generation as the attributes on there, and I chose to go for 12% critical hit damage mod. And we went for Obliterate, what is boosted with TU20 as well. Critical hits increase total weapon damage by 1% for 10 seconds and stacks up 25 times. So this can give you that 25% weapon damage, or it will give you the 25% weapon damage, because we're running around with a crit armor generation build. It's a lot easier to keep up now, because it's now 10 seconds, where in TU19 it was only 5 seconds. So you will almost always have that Obliterate fully stacked, giving you that extra 25% weapon damage. Then jumping over to my last piece of the build, and of course giving us that extra 3% armor generation, boosting us up to that 6.5% armor generation, and that's the Memento. Core attributes on there, all 3, so weapon damage, armor, and skill tier. I went for 12% critical hit damage mod on there, and we mainly using this, of course, for the armor generation and for that extra damage output. The skill tier is very nice as well, will help us for our skills, of course, but mainly we're doing it for that 3% armor generation and that 30% extra weapon damage whenever you picked up 30 stacks, the max stacks of that Memento. You will get that very, very fast, and you will have that insane armor generation active of a total of 6.5%, and gaining even more damage output with the 30 extra percent weapon damage. And that's why I chose for the Memento. So this is the full overview of the build, quick and easy, and it is so good after the update of TU20. We now have even more armor generation. You can go to 7% armor generation, but I chose to go for a little bit more damage output than that extra 0.5% of armor generation. Then jumping over to my skills, I'm using the Revive Hive because I still like to play solo. This gives us an extra life if needed. You almost never go down with this build. And I chose to go for 10% stim efficiency, 5% range, and 10% health as the mods on there. And then, of course, again, my favorite skill, the foam launcher. 9.8% in shared duration, 1 extra ammo for the mods on there. Giving us an extra 3 ammo, of course, by that extra ammo mod. And, of course, from on my Memento backpack. And that's pretty much the whole overview of the build. It is a lot of fun. But let's get over to the stats real quick. And we have 92.3k weapon damage. But don't forget, this is without the Memento stacks. I will show those stats in a little bit. We have 54% critical hit chance and 140% critical hit damage with a 75% headshot damage on there as well. You could go for 60% crit chance. I usually go between 55 and 60% and then build into the other damages, but that 54% felt pretty good, and I kinda wanted to stay at 140% critical hit damage. Then jumping over to, of course, the armor, we have almost 1.5 million armor. That gives us almost 150k armor on kill, and then of course that 66.3k armor generation a second. But again, this is without the Memento procs, so let me show you the Memento stats real quick. As you can see, we went up quite a lot with our weapon damages, boosting us up around that 105k weapon damage output. And of course, if we then go over to our defense, our armor on kill will of course be the same, but our armor generation went up to 110k, close to that 111k armor generation. And that's why with this build, you can still beam through enemies while staying alive, having that extra survivability, because I've seen a lot of y'all respond underneath my videos that you want some more survivability instead of some more damage output, and this is the perfect build for that. Now let's go over a few changes if you want to do that for your build. So let's get over to the build again, and if for example you do not have this Saint Elmo, or you don't really like to play with the Saint Elmo and you want to go for a different AR, let's choose the ACRE for example, very good gun after the update, then we kind of have a problem with our stats. Because that Saint Elmo is so godly with his attributes on the gun, with 20% crit chance and 20% crit damage, we're losing a little bit. So if you jump over, then we have 49% critical hit chance and 120% critical hit damage. You kind of want to boost that critical hit chance up. So what you can do then is of course change a mod around if you want, or you could change that Grupo holster to a Seska holster. And the Seska holster and the Grupo holster will be exactly the same. 15% weapon damage, 6% critical hit chance, 12% critical hit damage, and then let's switch over to that Seska. And now, because we're gaining an extra 10% critical hit chance, we're boosting ourselves up to that 59% critical hit chance and 105% critical hit damage. You could even lose a 6% mod to get you to 53% and then to 117% critical hit damage. Just figure out what you like, but overall, the best way to get your damage output is between 55 and 60% critical hit chance, and then build into your critical hit damages. So this is a little bit of an alternative way to build it if you do not have that Saint Elmo, or you of course don't want to play with that Saint Elmo. And that's pretty much it. A little alternate build as well at the end. But let me know in the comments down below if you made this build already. Are you playing with this build, or did you set it up completely different? I would love to hear your opinion down below, so hit me up in the comments. And of course, if you liked the video or helped you out in any way or form, make sure to like this video. And if you're new here and or you want to be updated about the Division 2, the Division universe and the future Division 3, make sure to hit that subscribe button as well. And I'll see you in the next one. PurePrime out!